Welcome to our Research Like a Pro with DNA question and answer series. And we are going to talk about how do I plan and prioritize DNA research. So, this can be a really good question to consider because DNA brings with it a lot. Here are some of the challenges that I thought of, and this probably isn't even all of them. But here are some of the things that I'm currently thinking about as I'm planning some research. I have got DNA tests on all the platforms. So we've got matches at Ancestry, MyHeritage, 23andMe, Family Tree DNA, Living DNA, GEDmatch. We're told to keep our DNA on all these websites so that we can take advantage of them. But the downside is that then we have thousands of matches and each one of them has a lot of tools that we need to learn and then utilize in our analysis. So that's a challenge in and of itself, just having so much data and so many tools. But then we also have four different types of DNA that we need to understand the inheritance pattern and how we could use that. We have autosomal DNA, Y DNA, mitochondrial DNA, and the X DNA. So that adds another layer to all of this. And then finally, we have a lot of possible genetic genealogy projects. You might have unknown parentage. It could be pretty recent, yourself. Um, Grandparent, parent, this could be something that you're doing. Or if you're like me, you have a lot of brick wall ancestors, or you might just want to be confirming genetic ancestors, and we all have a lot of ancestors. So if we're doing that, that's a big project. So, with all of these ideas about how to plan our DNA research, what can help us to actually conquer some of this overwhelm with so much to do? Well, the reason why we do want to plan and prioritize is we want to make progress. We all have really difficult research cases are hoping that we'll solve with DNA, and they often are just not a one-shot project. Often we have to do multiple phases. We make a little progress here and then a little progress the next time we tackle it. And so we can keep on going till we eventually get to an answer. Now, another thing that is really helpful for us to think about with this idea of planning and prioritizing is making sure we get the testing of our best candidates for research problem taken care of. And we've also been told to test the oldest generation of our research subject. But if we're not paying attention, some of those oldest generations may pass away before we can get them tested. So this is something we really want to prioritize. We want to think about and look through our tree and think about what we want to do. And then, of course, wise use of time. I don't know about you, but I can sit down at my ancestry matches and I could probably waste several hours just clicking around, looking for interesting um, cousin matches, looking at trees. It's really easy to waste a lot of time when we're playing with our DNA. So we don't all have that much time. We've got to do some planning and prioritizing. So, as I was thinking about this question, I was reminded of one of my favorite productivity tools, and that is the Getting Things Done methodology. I discovered this several years ago when I was feeling a bit overwhelmed with doing a genealogy business as well as my own research and education things that I was doing in the genealogy world. And so I ran across David Allen's Getting Things Done methodology, and it's really helped me a lot. So we're going to look at this whole idea of planning and prioritizing our DNA under this umbrella of what we call GTD for those of us who are practitioners in this methodology. So we'll go through each one of these and just think about how it can help us in our research planning. So we'll talk about capture, clarify, organize, reflect, and engage. And I actually flipped these two because it seemed to fit better with research planning. So first of all, capturing. I think this is a really important step to do to take a look at your tree, maybe spend an afternoon, maybe just an hour, who knows how much time you need, but identify all the possibilities, the things that you really want to get done with your DNA. And I would just list these out somewhere so you've got it. Maybe you do want to confirm ancestral lines. Maybe there's some specific ones you want to confirm because you're a little unsure of your research. We all have brick walls. At least I hope somebody else besides me has brick walls where we are trying to figure out that next generation back. a lot of us want to find living cousins because it's fun to find living cousins. They might have more stories or photos, more information about our ancestors. Even if they're ancestors we know full well who they are, maybe our cousins will give us some more insight into them. And then we might be wanting to do some long-term projects, like a big Y-DNA or mitochondrial DNA project or some chromosome mapping. So the purpose of this step is just to get it all down. Get it in your head what you want to do. Now, I did create a template on the Airtable Universe. This is available for free for anyone. And I titled it Track Your Ancestral Research DNA Template. So first I did just a Track Your Ancestral Research template. And then I thought it would be good to add DNA to this as well. And the reason I created this template was because I found I was forgetting research I had done. I was forgetting I had done a project on an ancestor and starting to do the timeline again and realize, oh goodness, I already wrote a report, did a full project. So I started this so that I could have an easy way to remember what I was doing. But I love adding the DNA. So this is just a little bit of the template. It's all anonymized. And when you go to Airtable Universe, if you do want to try using this out, then you will get either one that's blank or one that's got some examples like this. So you'll see I've got here where I can put people who've shared their autosomal DNA with me. They're my test takers. And then I've calculated the coverage for each of these ancestors and put it at whichever testing companies. So I've got coverage at Ancestry, Family Tree DNA, 23andMe, and MyHeritage. So I have a place for that. I have a place for my Y-DNA test taker, my mitochondrial DNA test taker, and then some notes. And then I have several blanks where I do not have test takers for these particular lines. So that gives me some ideas about who I should be tracking down. So this is just something that might help you as you're doing this brainstorming session of what you want to do with your DNA, because it will see at a glance what you do have. And maybe you'll realize that you really need more coverage in Ancestry. You need some more people to share with you. You know, it just gives you some place to take a look at the whole big mix. So after we have got that brainstormed list, then we're going to clarify. And this is where we're going to really think about all these different things we've identified we want to do with our DNA. So we can think broadly about them first. Is this something we really want to do right now? Is this burning a hole in our to-do list, or can we put this off for the future? So, some things to think about doing now would be that targeted testing for older relatives and maybe even contacting matches, because we know that people, when they take their DNA test, they're often more likely to sign in and look at their at least their ethnicity estimates, look at matches, and maybe they'll see a message if you contact them right away. So this could be something that you want to do, you know, often and now. This could be something you just put on your calendar to do. But you think about all of those things and kind of where you want those to be in your life. And then we're going to think deeply and do project planning. And this is where we take just one focused objective and we're going to go deep on it. So we can also, on that specific project, we can do brainstorming about what kind of tools we want to use with the testing companies or third-party tools, who we might need to test for that specific research objective. And we want to think about this in terms of the very next action. So we'll come back to next actions, but often we have just a broad idea of doing something and we haven't broken it down enough to make it doable. So, research planning steps, as we really think about a DNA research project, we have this focus objective and we want to have a summary of known facts. And this is going back to documentary evidence. What do we know about this ancestor? We create a hypothesis based on the objective and the summary of known facts. And then we want to make a list of identified sources. So this is a place to really do some good brainstorming. And from that, we're going to prioritize. So going back to this idea of clarifying and thinking deeply on a project, some of the things we want to consider when we're thinking deeply about how to do DNA and prioritize, we really want to think about which testing company are we going to work with. Do we set ourselves sometimes an overwhelming task, like look at the matches for this ancestor on all the testing companies and look for all the best matches? Well, that's kind of overwhelming with so many to look at. Maybe we just narrow that down and think of which is the testing company that will be the best. Think of where we'll find the most DNA tests. And right now, that's at Ancestry and at 23andMe that have the most tests. But if your best match is maybe over on Family Tree DNA, maybe you want to work there. Or if you are hoping to pick up some European testers, maybe you'll be at MyHeritage. So you really want to think carefully about which testing company you want to work with. And then we all need the trees. And so you also want to think about how easy is it going to be to identify your matches? Are there trees on that testing company website? Maybe it's a great website, but there are no trees. And it's hard to look at trees, or they're private, or they're not very user friendly. So, this can be a big deal. And then we also want to think about the built-in tools for that testing company. Do they have clustering? Do they have chromosome browsers? What are you really going to want to use? So these are all things to consider carefully when we are building a research plan. And then there are also a lot of third-party tools. So many good tools out there. And again, we want to think carefully. We may think it's fun to choose a tool that we haven't used before and have it be part of our research plan. But if it's going to keep us from really learning anything because it's so difficult to tackle and it's going to take so much time, maybe that's not the best use of our time in a research plan, in our research project. So we do want to think about that, the ease of use, and also how useful is the information it's going to give you. Does it have the ability to tell you really what you want to know? So those are some things to think carefully about. Is there a cost to the tool? How much time will it take to actually use it, to learn it? And some of these things are really important to think about, because otherwise you might be making yourself a list of tools you want to use, but without really thinking about it, setting yourself up for failure when it was too time consuming and you just gave up. Now, also part of thinking deeply is this idea of targeted testing. And do you want to try to find a Y-DNA, a mitochondrial DNA test taker? Do you need more autosomal DNA coverage? So then again, think about the candidate pool. So are you trying to find Y-DNA and the ancestor had one son who had one son? It's going to be really, really difficult. Or is it possibly going to be pretty easy because there's a lot of descendants, a lot of men coming down? Think about how long it's going to take you to build out descendancy and how many candidates there might be to use. You might want to tackle that anyway, but is it the first thing you want to do? And then think of your age of possible testers. Again, back to that idea of testing the oldest generation. And then access to possible testers. Is it going to be easy to find some of these people? Is it a company that sends messages if you, or sends emails if you message someone? Do these people never look at their messages? Sometimes you can see if they've been logged onto the website in the last day or month or year. And if they haven't been on for a few years, it might be difficult to contact them. So it's just some things to think about with this idea of targeted testing. And then methodology. So again, what's going to be best for the research objective? We don't need to do everything in one fell swoop. So we have pedigree triangulation, segment triangulation, genetic networks, DNA analysis. What do we want to do? And again, thinking of the time, the access to DNA, the amount of DNA, all of these things really carefully considered will help us to be more successful in our research planning and just in our DNA research in general. So this idea of prioritizing after we have a big list of things we'd love to do with this project, it's to break down our big ideas into something smaller and that we have a next action. I have found this to be the most amazing tip in David Allen's Getting Things Done. the idea of a next action. So many times the things on our to-do list, or in this case, we'll say our research plan, just seem big and overwhelming. So maybe we just break those big things down into smaller steps and we think of the next action, and that is what goes on our research plan. And then we just limit our plan to 3 DNA action items of those next action. So here's an example. We've got, this is something that I want to do on my current project to seek a Y-DNA tester among Elijah Dillard's male line descendants. And a Y-DNA result would allow comparison with known Dillard surname lines and could narrow or confirm the specific Dillard family branch. So that's a great item to have on my research plan, but really, what is the next action? It's kind of built in there, but maybe a more focused next action or research plan item would be just to build the descendancy of the two sons. You know, among amongst this is finding someone and then trying to find their address or contact information and then reaching out to them and then sending them a Y-DNA kit. There's a lot of steps that come after you actually find someone who's a possibility. So the next action really would be to build the descendancy of the two sons. This is a better item to put in a research plan that's just more focused. You could still have this, but then you could have the next bullet point be the next action, what you really want to do for this research project. So after you have your plan, then you have to engage in your plan. What's the use of having a plan if you don't actually do it? So this is part of the research phase. And I also love this idea from getting things done that when you sit down or plan some time to work on your research, you think about your energy. Are you a night owl? Are you a morning person? Are you doing something hard that requires a really good brain, or can you just kind of click through and do things that are easy? So think about your energy, your brain power. And then how much time do you have? Sometimes we don't want to get started because it's just going to take us so much time. And if we have small tasks that we could do when we just have a few minutes, sitting down, maybe looking at just one match, just recording one match in our Airtable base or our spreadsheet. And then the context. Are we working somewhere where it's easy to focus, like a desk with extra monitors, or are we on a laptop in the gym, where we can't focus as much? So it's good to think of where we're going to be engaging with our research. And then when we finish up our research, we're going to write up what we found. And this is an opportunity to do some good reflection, kind of thinking back about what we want to get done with our DNA as far as that research project we just did. And this is where we can again do some brainstorming. We can think about what we discovered and what do we want to do next for the DNA. What did we actually find out? And maybe we've had to change course a bit and think of different things to do. And just take a good hard look and think about, is DNA going to help me? How can it help me? And get some good ideas right when you are fresh from the project. Good time to reflect. So remember reasons why we might want to plan and prioritize DNA research instead of just clicking around and looking at matches, because it can help us make progress on those challenging cases. And it's making sure we're getting our testing done of our best candidates for a research problem. One of my goals is to go back to my project tracking sheet and make sure I do have someone tested for all of my lines. So this has been a good reminder for me that I have got some things I need to work on. And finally, wise use of time. Let's make sure we are really using our time wisely as we're considering what to do with our DNA, as we're trying to become better genetic genealogists and make more discoveries. So, thank you and good luck as you think about how to plan your research and some ideas for prioritizing.